$6.89. That's your checking account balance, not your savings. You don't have savings. That's just the number sitting there at the bottom of the screen at 2:17 in the morning. Pale blue light on your face. Lying on a futon you found on Craigslist and cleaned with a vacuum you borrowed and never returned. You stare at it like maybe it will change. It doesn't change. You have $2,400 in credit card debt at 24.99% interest that you don't fully understand yet. You have $28,000 in student loans that send you an email every month that you've stopped opening. You have a shift at 6 a.m. You are 22 years old. You are not behind. You tell yourself you are not behind. But the math doesn't stop. The math runs underneath everything. Underneath the shift. Underneath the commute. Underneath the dinner where you order the cheapest thing and calculate the tip 3 times before you leave it. This is what the bottom feels like. Not dramatic, not cinematic. Just a low, constant calculation running on a loop. A register you can't close. A tab you can never fully pay. You don't talk about money. Nobody does. Not at this level. Not really. But everybody at this level is doing the same arithmetic. Everybody is moving money between accounts like they're rearranging debt. Everybody knows their account number by heart. Everybody is $300 away from something going wrong. The first rule. At zero, money is not a subject. It is a climate. You either have enough air or you're already underwater. And you can't always tell which one it is until something breaks. Something breaks. The car. Of course it's the car. $740 you don't have for a repair you can't avoid. You put it on the card. You feel the weight of it settle on top of the weight that was already there. You pick up an extra shift. You eat rice and eggs for 11 days. You are not proud of it. You are not ashamed of it. You are just doing the math. And then something else happens. Small, almost invisible. You get a refund you forgot about, $180. And instead of absorbing it into the general noise of barely surviving, you move it to a separate account. Not savings. You don't call it savings. You call it nothing. You just move it. And you don't touch it. That's it. That's where it starts. Not with discipline. Not with vision. With one decision you made on a Tuesday that you almost didn't make. You get a raise. Not a significant one. $4,800 a year before tax. It arrives as $287 extra per month after everything is taken out. You felt like you could breathe for about 6 hours. Then the lease renewal came with a $150 increase, and you did the math again and breathed a little less. Expenses expand to meet whatever space you make for them. This is the first law of the bottom. You learn it not from a book, but from watching it happen to you, in real time, repeatedly, until you stop being surprised by it and start building walls around the space before the expenses can find it. You pay off the credit card. Not all at once. Slowly, over 8 months, $50 here, $200 there, a month where you paid nothing because you had nothing, and a month where you threw $400 at it and watched the number drop and felt something you didn't have a word for at the time. Later, you would call it agency. The sense that a decision you made changed a number, that you are not just being moved by the current, but occasionally, briefly, moving against it. You screenshot the zero balance. You send it to no one. No one would understand what it cost to get there, but you know. And for the first time, knowing is enough. You're 25. Your net worth is approximately $4,000. That sounds like something until you subtract the student loan balance, and it becomes negative $24,000, and you stop looking at it that way. But there's $4,000 in an account you don't touch, and there's something different about how you move now. You're not just surviving forward, you're building something, even if what you're building is very small and very slow and sometimes invisible. You start reading. Not self-help, not motivation, not the kind of content that tells you your mindset is the only thing between you and a yacht. You read about how money actually moves, what interest rates mean when they're working for you instead of against you, what an index fund is, why fees matter over decades in ways that seem abstract until you run the numbers, and the abstraction becomes a house you didn't buy. You open a brokerage account. You stare at it for 6 weeks before you put anything in. You put in $800. The market does nothing interesting for 2 months. Then it drops 4%, and you feel a specific kind of panic you hadn't prepared for. The panic of watching something you built get smaller through no action of your own. You almost pull it out. The cursor sits over the sell button for a long moment. You don't sell. This is the decision. Not the $800, the not selling. The moment you decide whether fear is running your financial life or you are. You don't fully know yet that this is the decision. You'll know later. You'll be able to point back to this exact moment and say, that's when it changed. You cross $10,000 for the first time. You are 27. You have never had 5 figures before, not once, not in your entire life. You check the balance 6 times on the first day, not from anxiety, from disbelief, from the strange sensation of being a person who has $10,000, which is a category of person you weren't sure included you. The psychological weight of $10,000 when you've never had it is not proportional to the number. It feels like more than it is. You feel, briefly, like a different kind of person. You're not, but you feel it. And feeling it matters more than you expect, because it shows you something about yourself. That you are capable of building towards something you couldn't see. That you are capable of the patience that building requires. You keep going. The shift happens somewhere around $40,000 in net worth. You're 29. You're making $62,000 a year. You have a Roth IRA. You have a small brokerage account. You have no credit card debt. Your student loans are still there, a long, slow creature you're feeding every month. But they're not running you anymore. You're running them. You feel, by most measures, fine, stable, responsible. You're doing everything you were told to do. Emergency fund, 401k contributions, no lifestyle inflation. You're doing all of it. And then you sit down one evening with a spreadsheet and run the numbers honestly, all the way out. 40 years of disciplined saving at your current income with your current contributions. You type in the variables, you let it calculate. The number that comes back is fine. It's enough. It is not what you want. And this is the competence plateau. The place where you've learned to survive well, to execute the basics with skill, to do the responsible thing. And then discovered that the responsible thing, done perfectly for 40 years, produces a life you could live, but not a life that excites you. You're good at not losing. You are not yet good at building. The second rule. Salary is a ceiling that comes dressed as a floor. The moment you see it clearly, you cannot unsee it. Every raise looks different after that. Every promotion. You start asking not what this does to my income, but what this does to my ceiling. You start a side project. You don't call it a business. You're careful not to call it a business because calling it a business makes it real. And real things can fail. And you're not ready to fail publicly yet. It's just a thing you do on weekends that earns $300 a month, then $700, then $1,400. You reinvest everything for 14 months. You eat the same lunches. You don't upgrade anything. You don't tell your employer. You don't tell most people. You are building something in a room that no one else can see, and you're not sure yet if it's real or if it's just a thing you're doing to feel like you have options. It becomes real when it crosses your car payment, when it crosses your rent, when you realize that you have created, from scratch, a thing that earns money while you're doing other things. That is the first time you understand what an asset is. Not theoretically, physically. Something that works when you're not working. Something that earns while you sleep. Your relationship with time changes. You start measuring hours differently. Every hour you spend on something that doesn't compound starts to feel like an hour the machine isn't running. You become more protective of your attention in a way that sometimes makes you difficult. You become the person who doesn't come to every event, who doesn't answer every invitation, who sits at the dinner table, calculating in a back room of his mind, while the front room is laughing and eating. You don't love this about yourself. You can't seem to stop it. Your net worth crosses $80,000, then $110,000. You're 31. You're 33. Net worth is $190,000. The side project is generating $5,400 a month. You still have your job. You haven't told anyone what the side project makes. You've noticed that talking about money at this level makes people behave in ways that aren't useful. Envy or dismissiveness. Neither helps you. You keep quiet and keep building. You start saying no to things. A destination wedding you'd have to liquidate something to attend. A group trip where the costs are split equally and you'd effectively be subsidizing three people who spent more than they planned. A business opportunity pitched by a friend who has a good idea and no understanding of cash flow. No, no, no. You feel the friction in the relationships. You feel people pulling back slightly when you decline. Feel the unspoken question underneath the silence. You stay quiet. You say no anyway. The machine keeps running. Your investments return $6,200 in a single year without you doing anything. You sit with that number for a moment. You didn't earn that. It just appeared, a consequence of earlier decisions, a return on patience and consistency. You understand now that the separation between people who build wealth and people who don't isn't intelligence. It isn't even discipline. Not exactly. It's the willingness to defer, to plant things you won't eat for years, to work on behalf of a future self you can't fully picture yet. The third rule: below $250,000, you are building the base. Above it, the base starts building itself. The compounding kicks in a way that's no longer theoretical. You can feel it. A month where your investment gains exceed your salary. A week where the rental income and the side project and the portfolio movement add up to more than you used to make in a month. You start protecting capital, not to keep it, but to deploy it. You're thinking about your first property. You spend 4 months learning before you spend a dollar. You buy a small rental unit at 34. It's not glamorous. The tenants are occasionally difficult. The maintenance is a recurring inconvenience. But there's equity building in the background. Slowly, the way trees grow, the way you don't notice, until suddenly you notice. The gap between where you are and where a salary alone would have taken you is not abstract anymore. The gap is in your account. The gap is in your options. The gap is in the fact that you could, if you needed to, stop working for 6 months and be fine. You don't stop, but you could. And that possibility changes everything. Not your lifestyle, your psychology. The difference between running towards something and running away from it is the difference between fear and freedom. And it's measured not in dollars, but in options. You're 36. Net worth is $420,000. You have a rental property with $67,000 in equity, a brokerage account at $180,000, a business doing $7,800 a month. You drive the same car you drove 4 years ago. This is not an accident. Every time you've considered upgrading it, you've run the math on what that money does at 8% over 10 years and put the thought away. You've restructured the side project twice. It's not really a side project anymore. It has a name. It has systems. You brought in one person, part-time, and it runs more smoothly than when you were doing everything yourself. You are learning, slowly, and sometimes painfully, the difference between working in a business and building one. You turned down a job offer that would have paid $175,000 a year. Your parents don't understand. You explain it partially. You tell them it didn't feel right, which is true, but not the whole truth. The whole truth is that the job would have been a ceiling, a comfortable ceiling, a high ceiling, but a ceiling. And you've already had a ceiling. You know what ceilings feel like now. At $500,000, your money starts to have a personality. It has preferences. It wants to go certain places and resists others. You've begun to think about capital allocation the way you used to think about time management. Not what can I afford, but where does this produce the most return per unit of risk? These are different questions. The first question is about survival. The second is about leverage. The distance between them is the distance between two different versions of a life. You have one investment return $34,000 in 10 months. You have another lose $11,000. You don't panic about the loss. Not because you don't care about $11,000. You do. But because you understand now that the loss is the cost of participation, that you cannot be in the game and also be safe from the game. That risk is not the enemy. The wrong risks are the enemy, and you're getting better at telling the difference. You reposition, you don't retreat. This is the thing people watching from the outside consistently misunderstand about wealth. They think the people at the top are there because they avoided risk. They're not. They're there because they chose which risks to sit with and built the resources to survive the ones that didn't work out. You're 39. Your net worth has crossed $800,000. You feel the seven-figure mark the way you feel a city before you arrive in it. The light changing, the density thickening, something in the air. You stop sleeping the same way. Not from stress, from intensity. You're running scenarios at 5 a.m. You're thinking about the business, not as income, but as an asset with a multiple, a thing that could be worth 3 times, 5 times its annual revenue if you structure it correctly, if you build the systems, if you remove yourself from the operations, enough that it can function as something separate from you. Your net worth crosses $1 million. It's a Tuesday. Nothing ceremonial about it. You check the brokerage app after a morning meeting, and the number is there. You sit with it for a moment. You thought you'd feel different. You thought there'd be something larger. There's a quiet satisfaction, clean and brief, and then almost immediately it's not enough. Not in a frantic way, in a clear, practical way. $1 million at 4% is $40,000 a year. That's not freedom. That's a starting point. The identity shift isn't that you're unhappy. It's that you realize happiness was never exactly what you were building toward, and you're only just admitting that to yourself now. What you were building toward was something harder to name: optionality, permanence, a structure that persists, something that continues after you stop pushing it. The fourth rule: the millionaire milestone isn't a destination. It's a proof of concept. The first confirmation that the system works, that you can build something from nothing, that the principles you applied from $6.89 to here scale, that the gap between where you started and where you are is not luck, but compounded decision. Once you know this, the number stops being a goal and becomes a data point. You stop going to the events you used to attend to feel connected to something. The startup meetups, the finance networking hours, where everyone talks about what they're building and the conversation has a specific texture: ambitious but vague, energetic but shallow. You don't have contempt for it. You were there, but you don't need it anymore. The conversations you need now happen in smaller rooms with fewer people and no name badges. You're 42. Net worth is $2.1 million. The business did $3.8 million in revenue last year. You have 2 rental properties. The portfolio is at $1.4 million. You have a wealth manager you trust, which took 3 attempts to find because the first 2 knew less about your situation than you did, and you needed someone who knew more. For the first time in your adult life, money is simply a resource. The way time is a resource. The way attention is a resource. You don't think about your checking balance. You think about allocation. Where is the capital positioned? What is the return profile? What are you not seeing? The thing people cannot buy at lower levels is not the account balance. It's the time. Real time. Not vacation days. Not a long weekend. Time that belongs to you structurally, not as a reward, but as a condition. You take 3 weeks off. You don't check email for 4 days of it. This is the thing, not the trip, the 4 days. You're building something now that exists in a different conversation, not a better conversation, a different one, less accessible, less legible to people who aren't in it. You feel the distance between your reality and most people's reality widening. You didn't plan for it. It just grows. The way the numbers grow, quietly, steadily, independent of your intention. The fifth rule: wealth is not what you accumulate, it's what you no longer have to do. Every dollar that removes a constraint is worth more than a dollar that adds a comfort. The constraints you've removed, the obligation to trade time for money, the anxiety of the unexpected expense, the need to calculate every decision, these are the real returns. The account balance is just the measure. You're 47. Net worth is $5.4 million. The game has changed texture. It's no longer about building, it's about positioning. You are moving capital now, not working for it. The distinction sounds small, it is enormous. You are in a deal that will return $1.2 million in 22 months. You are in another that might return nothing. You understand the relationship between them. One de-risks the other. The correlation between the outcomes is the actual investment thesis, and that sentence would have meant nothing to you 15 years ago. You start meeting people who are at $20 million, $50 million. You study them the way you used to study people who had $10,000 when you had nothing. You watch how they think, not what they own, how they think. The pace is different. The patience is longer. The time horizon stretches in ways that stop feeling abstract and start feeling structural. They are not trying to win every position. They are trying to stay in the game longer than everyone else at the table. Duration is the strategy. You stop talking about money with people who don't have it, not from arrogance, from a kind of accuracy. The conversations become imprecise. People assign meaning to numbers that the numbers don't carry. At this level, $400,000 is a position size. Saying that in the wrong room makes you someone's villain. So you don't say it. You get quiet in ways people sometimes mistake for coldness. It's not coldness. It's just that some context can't hold the conversation you're in now, and you've stopped trying to force it. You make a decision you would have called complicated 5 years ago. A company you've invested in restructures its workforce. 200 people. You know the founder. You've been to dinner at his house. You don't call him. You review the cap table. You hold. The company's margin profile improves. Your position increases in value. You sit with this for a few days. You don't feel good about it. You don't feel destroyed by it. You feel the distance, the gap that opens between decisions and consequences as the scale grows. The widening happens quietly, and you don't resist it. And not resisting it is its own kind of decision. You're 53. Net worth is $14 million. You have structures in place that will outlive you. A trust, a foundation that runs on $600,000 a year and functions partly as access, partly as legacy, partly as a version of meaning that money at this level needs to borrow from somewhere. You own pieces of 16 companies. You have a direct line to people who shape policy, not politicians, policy. You don't lobby. You advise. You sit on two boards. The distinction between advising and deciding has become important to you in ways you try to examine honestly, because the line moves, and you've noticed that people at your level sometimes don't notice when it moves. The sixth rule: above $10 million, your reputation becomes a financial instrument. It earns returns independent of your active decisions. Your name attached to a deal changes the deal. Your presence in a room changes the room. This is a form of leverage you didn't build intentionally, but you'd be lying if you said you weren't aware of it now. You walk into rooms you used to only read about, not celebrity rooms, rooms where decisions are made before they become public. A meeting with a family office managing $800 million who wants to co-invest alongside you. A conversation with a private equity firm looking at a platform acquisition where your operational experience is genuinely useful. You are at the table not as a courtesy, but because your pattern recognition has value to the people who invited you. You feel the isolation not as loneliness, but as a kind of altitude sickness. The people in your life exist at a remove from your actual reality. Your closest relationships are with people who operate at the same elevation, not by design, but by the natural selection of conversation. The things that absorb your attention: fund structures, secondaries, dynasty planning, carve outs, simply don't translate in most rooms. You're not a different person. You're a person whose context has become untranslatable to most people who knew you before. You give more than you ever have, not for the reputation, not entirely for the foundation access, though you understand that's part of it and you've stopped pretending otherwise. You give because at this level, money has stopped being a measure of anything meaningful about you. And giving is one of the few remaining things that still feels like a choice that means something. You're 61. Your net worth is $94 million. dollars. The exact figure is known to 4 people. You have not worked a conventional day in 11 years. You have not stopped working. The work just looks different now. It looks like a phone call at 6 a.m. It looks like a question asked in a meeting that redirects a room. It looks like a decision you made 6 years ago that's still paying out. You think in cycles now, not quarters, not years. Cycles, demographic cycles, infrastructure cycles, credit cycles. You position ahead of them the way a sailor reads weather 3 days out. You are sometimes wrong. Being wrong at this level means a position underperforms by 200 basis points, and you rebalance. It does not mean your life changes. There is no single decision that can undo what you've built, and knowing that is a kind of freedom that doesn't have a name. There is a board meeting, 7 people in a room with enough combined capital to reshape a mid-sized economy. You speak for 5 minutes. You ask 3 questions. The room recalibrates around those questions. You leave before the lunch is served. This is power at its most compressed. No spectacle, no volume, no performance of importance. Just a room that adjusts to your position. You don't think much about the $6.89 anymore. Not because you've forgotten it. You remember it with a precision that occasionally surprises you. The pale light, the 2 a.m. silence, the weight of the number, and all the numbers it would become. What you think about more is the shape of the journey, not the milestones, not the accounts, the shape, the way it started as arithmetic and became strategy and became structure and became something you can't fully describe to anyone who hasn't made the same crossing. Not because you're better than them, because language doesn't survive the distance. And somewhere in this city right now, there is a 22-year-old staring at a phone screen in the dark. His balance is $6.89. He is doing the math on whether he can cover the utility bill before the shift on Friday. He puts the good coffee back at the grocery store. He gets the store brand. He thinks this is a story about money. He thinks if he just makes enough of it, something will resolve. Some tension he can feel but can't name. Some gap between the life he's living and the life that feels possible when he's alone and quiet and not calculating. He doesn't know yet what has to resolve. He doesn't know what the machine will ask of him, not in dollars, in distance, in the slow accumulation of trade-offs that don't feel like trade-offs when you're making them, that only reveal themselves later, in the gap between who you were and who you've become. He doesn't know that the discipline compounds, and so does the distance, that the same engine that builds the accounts reshapes the person, that you cannot run this long at this intensity and come out unchanged. That unchanged was never actually on the table. The machine doesn't ask if you're ready. It doesn't ask if the cost is worth it. It opens every morning and it takes whoever shows up. And whoever shows up consistently, patiently, without flinching, without stopping to ask the question everyone else is asking. They compound. The money compounds. The decisions compound. The distance compounds. The person you're becoming compounds. The balance is $6.89. It always starts there. It always will.